Commission meeting to order. My name is Kelly Rosecrans, Chairperson. Before we do our introduction, we do have a new Park and Recreation Commission member, Carolyn Martin. Thank you for volunteering.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we'll do I'd like to welcome public viewers as well. Can we do a round the table introduction? Yes. Norman?
Craig Braun, Commission Member.
Chris Bartek, Commission Member.
Tom Rayon, Commission Member from the Town Council.
Zach Verwink, Mayor.
Joe Terry, Director of Public Works.
Tom Eklund, Commission Member.
Carolyn Martin, Commission Member.
Matt Heidemann, staff.
Herman Blevins, Chief of Police.
Dawn Ducey, staff.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Our first order of business is approval of the October 14th, 2019 City of Wisconsin Rapids Park and Recreation meeting minutes. Is everybody able to review those? Thank you very much.
I'll move approval.
A second.
Motion by the mayor, second by Rick to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Number 3, review of the memorial policy for our parks. We'll probably be getting into some discussion on this here. Has everybody seen the celebration bench and table donation policy?
That was approved last summer, I think.
thought-
Do you remember? I think that was last summer.
I think so.
I think, yes.
Yeah, so why are we seeing it again then? If we approved it last summer?
Tom's referral had to do with memorials, so.
Yeah, I had turned in a referral basically, and it had to do with, it seems like at times that we were looking at more and more, and not that any are bad, that they look at it in a bad way, but that it's almost that it's, some of the parks seem to be becoming overloaded with memorials or monuments and that type of stuff, instead of, at least what I thought the original intent for a park was for more green space and that type of stuff. So, and I think we probably, even with what's been going on with the rejuvenation at downtown, I think there's a lot of benches that are in storage, if I'm not mistaken, memorial benches that are somewhere in storage and not where they were intended that to be. So just it was just a referral that I put in there, just and some was based probably because of what we did a month ago or so, but not that it was against that, but it's just that it seems like there's more and more of this that are going into the parks, when maybe there should be other places to be looked at for certain things to be put than in the park, in a park. So that's, I guess that's why it was on here. It was a referral of mine to review the, I guess just to bring that up. To me, it looked at, it just seems that we're putting more and more things into the parks versus for what the park was intended to be.
Commissioner Khan?
And maybe there may be other locations for things.
Yeah, so this policy says that the location must be approved by the Parks and Building Supervisor. So are you wanting it to change to something else, or?
The
Usually-
intent,
Go ahead.
no, the intent was just that we look at that. And I'll have to read this over here first too again, but the intent is to just not to almost automatically, when something comes forward, we put in a park, that is there a different place for it that something could be?
Okay.
So just,
To Tom's point, we get a lot of requests for memorial benches, and typically 80% of the people, 90% of the people want them along the riverbank. And I think part of it is we still have probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 of the very old metal framed with the wooden slat benches. There's a few in some of the park locations along the river. There's a few around the ball diamonds and a couple of the parks and playground areas. And I think that we're to the point where that priority should be shifted to replacing those, because most of them are in need, rather than adding some more in locations where we probably have sufficient capacity already.
Are those memorial benches too?
The existing ones?
Yeah.
No.
No, okay.
No.
Okay.
If somebody comes with a proposal, is part of the conversation to say, well, here's some options that you have at placement or not?
Yes, but like I said, primarily the people,
They want it along the river,
they want them along the river.
do.
Yeah.
which puts it in a couple parks.
Which, well, if you look at the West River Bank, for instance, I mean, there's a bench approximately every 100 feet.
Yeah.
I mean, we're pretty much full. I mean, unless you want a row of benches nonstop from one end to the other. And I don't think that's, aesthetically pleasing or really what we're after. But, and the other location now that's gonna be tough is Veterans Rapids View, because of the improvements that have been made down there. There were some benches and blocks that went along as part of that phase 1 and 2 rehabilitation. So, additional benches in that area can be very limited, if at all, also. So we kind of need to shift into replacing stuff that needs to be replaced, as opposed to having the primary criteria a location that the public, desires, I guess.
Yeah.
I had a question for Tom, and that was, and my interpretation of the item was maybe a bit more about the gift of the organ donation, the next group, thinking about our firefighters memorial. We now have an EMS memorial that's going to be adding to that firefighters memorial, not substantially, but there's a concept being floated in front of the city right now on that. We had the disc golf memorial. Folks came forward, minor features, but I think the way I interpret your referral is around balancing donor intent and then a bit more tactical, like what's the park plan? If the park plan is to add, refurbishment of the band shelter at Robinson, that would be a donor feature, in my mind. Thinking about like what are the existing features that need to be improved or could be enhanced by a donor contribution. Another thing I see in cities, or I see in park and rec communication, I don't know exactly where I've seen it, but more of a Friends of the Parks 501c3. Sometimes it's a separate entity than the city, a supporting nonprofit that folks can contribute. Maybe it's for urban forestry. We talked about that at our commission meetings, that maybe the city think about adding, the donor policy works for benches and tables and maybe trees and other things, but maybe we need a bit more of an expansive policy that addresses some of these or more of the fringe requests. As I would, because this puts us all in a tough position to say no, right? When this group comes before the commission with a good plan, but it's just a little bit difficult to say, yeah, we want to add that to our park, and then where do you stop, right? It's probably, if I'm reading into maybe answering your question that I asked you, but that would be just a few thoughts that I have, that maybe we think about going in a direction where we create a supporting entity that's truly a nonprofit. The city can, by virtue, take donations, and people get a tax deductible receipt for a contribution that's outside of their property tax payment. So anyway, that might be something to think about as a Friends of the Parks entity. With pool fundraising and that, some people think, well, if I'm writing a check to the city, I'm not necessarily getting a tax deduction. We do provide that, but a Friend of the Parks is sometimes maybe outside of the scope of what and it might address some of the other things on the agenda too.
So as part of what you're talking about too, just getting the word out or asking the question about, maybe you want to think about a memorial in a different capacity.
Right. What are a bit more appropriate guided memorial opportunities, as opposed to just somebody bringing a plan to the city commission in this case, and then we have to kind of up or down it, and it puts us in a tough spot or staff to tweak it too,
Well, and in some cases too, those memorials, like the trees, for example, if a tree is planted specifically for a person versus a contribution to the city's urban forest, because there are occasions where that tree doesn't survive, or there's some incident or whatever, and all of a sudden you've got a plaque. Well, we're going to replant. We have to maintain around some of these features where some of these donations really it's for the betterment of the urban forest throughout the parks, and just looking at things just a little bit differently than maybe that traditional concrete bench with a plaque on it.
So that's probably more about interaction with city staff when the first questions are asked around, hey, I want to memorialize somebody or something, what are my options?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're talking about.
Yeah. And more of a menu of options. I think when Dawn gets the calls about, you know, X, Y, and Z features, it's saying, okay, we've got a couple of other more expansive opportunities, and assigning values probably to it too. But I don't want to take your referral in a completely different direction. That's just a few thoughts I've been thinking about since that Gift of Life thing came before us, and you know, we were able to work through it. But
That makes a lot of sense. But are we talking about something different though versus the Gift of Life thing?
I don't know, and that's maybe more of a question for Tom. That's how I would interpret it. I just, you know, I think as our park system as a whole, you know, the
That
next
probably-
memorial that comes before us because of their organized group today might be great and organized and can maintain it and, you know, work through the agreement, but long term, the city's maybe in a different position. And I don't know how we arrived at the firefighters memorial. I think it's great and serves an awesome purpose, and I'm glad that we're the host city in the state, but, you know, I don't know the politics associated with how that all came to be and how we.
Has that been brought before any committee yet, or no?
The EMS component to it?
Yeah.
No, I think they just sent us a concept. Yeah. Yeah. But it's very much contained, I think, within the original
Existing
kind of footprint in
parameter
that.
footprint,
Yeah, right. But it's just another example, right? You know, we've got the firefighters and the EMS, and you know, the next group wants to create a memorial, which is awesome. I mean, I think from a tourism visitor and a quality of life, it's great to have these things. It's just I'm interpreting Tom's point that maybe there's other property that they can be
Right.
housed instead of
Maybe a better place for something, you know, I don't wanna see that a park becomes overrun with whatever, if they're benches or whatever type of memorials that there are versus, you know, what the park was for. You know, if it have something, if it's a band shell or something, or
Something that
some
complements
benches
the
that are
park.
there that
Yeah.
Right. But to leave, you know, so that we don't take all the space away from what the park is.
So one of the linchpins then would be establishing what that comprehensive parks plan looks like.
Yeah.
And then you would probably tailor memorial opportunities for each specific park layout, right?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
There is another side of this I'd like to ask about, because I think there was a number of benches removed recently.
To Tom's point, I think there were some that were temporarily moved, and because they haven't been, Veterans is not finished, Veterans Park in particular is not finished, they haven't been relocated there.
But were they donated? And are there
Right, and-
are there contacts to be made then?
Yeah, and I believe Dawn has held more of the course, but I've just seen email chains, and we've exchanged some emails on it, but I think the plan is to relocate them back into the park to the extent possible, and then, you know, to the extent that we can communicate with the donors too, right? I think there was some that have raised the question, where are the benches going? Are they not going back to the same spot? That's what you're talking about, Tom, right, is the riverfront benches?
Yeah, I mean,
probably.
if we're gonna have this policy and people are gonna donate, then if we have to remove them for some reason or replace them, then these people should be contacted, assuming you have the contact information, but
Right.
I don't think we have the outright right just to take them out and do nothing with them. I don't think that's the intent, so why would I wanna donate one if that's the case?
Yeah.
And that's my point, I think, about honoring donor intent, right? You know, trying to find that balance of if a donor gives us $1 million to do something that's a little counter to our parks, do we accept that $1 million gift? You know, we've got to have a plan, I think, that speaks to, you know, and I think that nobody's saying that extreme example, but I think that's.
Well, that's a
what's
valid
been
question
said,
though,
Right?
because, you know, you can't be in a position where you turn down $1,000 bench, but somebody wants to invest $500,000 into a city park, and you say, well, sure, that's fine.
And it might be the same person.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yeah.
could be,
Yeah, definitely.
Yep.
so,
So
okay,
is
you
this the
answered.
only policy that you currently have for memorial? Or is, I'm new, so I'm not aware.
I believe it is.
That's the only one I know of.
I'm not aware of any other policy.
Has there been other projects though where the city has asked for donations and you can get a plaque, you know, like if we've renovated something or not? Would that be on an individual project basis?
Project basis, you know, most of the features, yeah, based upon the improvement.
Okay, so not really.
And I think that's what begs the question, probably, to have some steering document, guidelines,
Yeah.
policy.
Like you wanna renovate the band shell and
Yeah,
whatever, Hyde Music donates 10 grand and, okay.
yeah.
What are we gonna do with it?
Yeah.
Right.
So you'd broaden this policy out to have all these other options?
Well, I think you'd,
I mean,
I don't know that if you included it in the policy, you'd have to add a component to it. You know, one is, for selection of certain items, but another component that's missing from that is, that topic of master planning and, rehabilitation and other, this is really tailored towards those benches and tables, because that's, at the time, that's what we were getting requests from donors for. And, so we sat down and tried to work on something to address that issue. Really not looking at the bigger picture at the time, that we have, we have a much broader spectrum to discuss and plan for here.
Right.
I think it'd be easier to handle it by project. So if you're gonna have a project, and so if people wanted to donate, you can make the provisions in that project to do what. It'd be, I don't know how you'd write it in here to catch everything.
I would venture to guess there's other policies that other municipalities have crafted that could maybe address some of that broader, maybe more of a process for how they're filtered, perhaps. When we get the $300,000 unencumbered gift for the zoo, it was basically make the improvements at the zoo. There wasn't any other provisions, so
Right.
some of those unencumbered, I think that gets to maybe a question that council has debated. If we get a grant, what's the encumbrances? If it's to match that grant, that's a conversation. You don't just automatically or arbitrarily accept it. I don't know. I don't want to put a lot of words in Tom's mouth, but I'm just thinking back to the other conversations that the council's debated over time that I've been around, and it could account for some of those things in a policy, I think, too.
I guess maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but when everything gets done along the along the riverbank and everything, and then next year a lot of people come in and want benches. I mean, we don't want.
There should be a plan for
A
each
plan
park that says there's this space
And
for
that'll have
benches
to be
or not.
developed somehow, or else.
And I think in talking with parks and just how Dawn has received some requests and just having internal conversations with folks, it's almost like, well, here's what the plan is. And I think Dawn shows that to folks. I think particularly if we just talk about the riverfront, those large precast concrete benches in Demetz, for example, right? I think all of them were sponsored.
Right.
And it was more or less, here's the city's plan. If that fits the donor intent, the donors, they'll pay a commensurate price based upon the value of the improvement, I think. Is that fair, Dawn? And I think, one is to reconcile some of the past locations and the lack of agreements or lack of mapping. There's some other issues there to reconcile, but I think going forward, if it's a new project, that's a lot easier than, saying Robinson, which has been on our docket for a while. If somebody comes and wants to renovate the band shell, I would assume we would entertain that venture and, it would meet the city's objectives, but if there's something else, would we entertain it? I don't know. That's, I think, probably the bigger question that you're maybe talking about. If it veers from the scope of existing park amenities, but that's me speaking now.
So once we have the park plan accomplished and there's that, at least a rough outline, then instead of just a bench and table donation policy, you would have probably a generalized policy around donating to any park project that's going on, and a suite of options that individuals could choose from based on the park location they're interested in.
Yep.
That might include benches and tables, it might not.
Right.
That's kind of what you're saying, right, Tom?
Yeah, things fit in certain areas.
Yeah.
And that's why, that's where I'm coming from really is, let's not lose sight of parks being parks, to me anyway.
Yeah.
It's fine to have donations of this and things to do, but not so it overtakes what the intent of the park
Right.
was for.
Are they working on a plan for, this will obviously come up with the aquatic center, there'll be lots of things needed in there, and I'm sure is that being worked on for?
There is. If
Yeah,
somebody
cool.
asks us if they give a gift, and want recognition, I think we're offering recognition over 1,000, every gift over 1,000 can be recognized somewhere, so whether it's the donor wall or benches or,
Okay.
trees, there's just a multitude of things in there. But I think, yeah, the point is on bigger scale, what's appropriate in the park maybe, and what's the park plan call for. And I know it's perfect timing, because our park plan is aged. I think it's this year, next is kind of the scale of a 2012 to 2020 or 2016 even maybe,
That's
yeah.
when we're in now.
Yeah, right. And it's time for a revisit of that, and I think that could certainly be a component of this too. But in the interim, we should probably have something in writing that addresses this.
Okay, any more discussion? Okay.
Maybe, is there a referral, maybe some direction, Tom, that you think that we should take, maybe have staff come and draft something maybe?
If staff had drafted something, I think if you could foster what, I guess where I'm trying to come from, that we don't lose sight of what the parks are, or donate, people can come forward and try to do something, but just, does it fit within the plan for what the park was for?
Yeah. Enhance an existing, existing features or improvements, refurbishment,
Yep.
yeah. And perhaps some examples too for us to look at a future meeting
Yep.
of existing policies or.
Yeah, I think we could, just develop some basic language as preliminary, that if it's something that's existing, for example, the band shell, where that could be something that it's appropriate for staff to move that forward. But if it's a new feature, different feature that isn't identified in our park plan, including some bench locations, right, or table locations, or significant changes, that should just come back before the commission and be reviewed as an individual project.
One minor thing, I just recommend having the date on this policy for those of us that don't remember when this came before the commission, just so if we do make future amendments to it.
Okay, thank you for all the input. We can move along to number 4, discuss policy for determination of closure of state park due to issues with patrons. This is a topic that's been brought up at a number of meetings. I guess I have to ask where we're at with that. There's a letter here from Steve. He had a
Well, his comments, the way I read them, are all parks, not specific, so.
Yep.
A city park, yes.
I thought when we talked about,
Escape.
like the pads and that, I thought there was language in there about how you could remove somebody, or, I don't know about shutdown, but.
Yeah,
Having a splash pad in that?
Splash pad,
Yeah, I do
yeah.
recall that.
maybe the chief could speak to this, but I think in some ways, the skate park's unique in that it's more of a controlled environment as far as being able to shut it down. It'd be virtually impossible to quote-unquote shut a park down other than the skate park. Because you're talking an open area, I mean, nobody is going to be able to enforce that. You could eject a person, but to actually shut the park down would be.
The splash pad, you just wouldn't have the water on, basically, right? But you couldn't keep people out of there.
Yeah, and
It depends on the situation.
Right, I don't know that you'd necessarily want to do that either, because you're punishing everybody then, not just the individual that caused the.
I think it was
But
more
you
about.
are when
re-
you shut
I think it
down the
was
skate
about-
park though, too.
I think it was about removal of people or banning them, not actually shutting it down, the splash pads. But,
What I'm saying then is the broader argument around shutting down the skate park or shutting down a park in general. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think this was a unique situation anyways. This was a group of individuals and they kept coming back multiple times. I mean, how many times did you guys get called?
It was
3, 4?
numerous times.
Numerous times. That's kind of a unique case. I mean, I don't recall ever having that problem in any other park.
but aren't there supposed to be some security cameras go up there after or part of the aquatic
There will be,
center?
yeah.
There will be, but at the end of the day, if our police department or fire department determines that there's a risk to public safety and health, we have to
Yeah.
let them do what they need to do.
That's what we
And-
talked about the last
Yep.
time we had this conversation. I don't
Yep.
think there was a commission member that was argumentative about that topic.
Correct.
My question just is, because what Alderman Colt is indicating is that should the Parks Department or you know, EMS or law enforcement have the authority to shut down any park? That's,
Absolutely.
I think when it comes to
And
law
I would tend to
enforcement,
agree with
yes,
that.
absolutely.
If I could speak, I mean, depending on the circumstance, let's say we have some type of an emergency, we're not gonna consult with we're gonna close that
Yeah.
area down, and then explain why later, but there could be certain circumstances where it has to be done.
You would do that now.
Correct, and then we would come back
Need
and
a
tell you why
policy
we
for
did
you
it,
to
but,
do it now.
I mean, there are numerous things I could think of off the top of my head that would force us to close an area, you know, or a park or whatever. In this particular instance, when we're talking about the skate park, it was necessary to shut the park down to this was a situation. That was the only way in this particular case. You had a couple of groups of people that were, in essence, fighting for possession of the park. So we closed the park for a certain amount of time, diffused the tensions between the two groups. We didn't have that problem after it reopened. In that particular case, I would stand by the decision to close that park all day long.
Yeah.
It was the only way to solve that particular situation that day. And if it didn't help that we had an officer injured and things of that nature as well. So I would argue for having the ability to close. I mean, we're talking a splash pad and things. My main, my interest at the moment is the skate park, because that's where we have most of our issues. But I see, any number of situations where it'd be on a weekend or a holiday or whatever, we'd be forced to shut down a park for whatever reason that there is, and that's a public safety decision to be made.
yeah.
Other protective service type situations may include when the pool is open. If we have water quality issues and when we have to close it, well, we'll close it. Now that's different because it's inside a fence and it's also a controlled area, but
Right.
there may be times where or certain areas may need to be closed for health and safety reasons.
Actually, in a pool environment, that's not uncommon. We had that at the Mead Pool. We
Right.
ended up closing
If you have a lightning
during the
storm.
summer, I don't know how many times, and it's required by state law.
And those standards are developed when we put together our pool use policy for the head guards, for staff. We need to make sure that we've got the water chemistry balance. We need to make sure that there's not a lightning storm within 30 minutes, so on and so forth. So those things tend to be spelled out as well. Some of the other park areas, and I'm just kind of spitballing here a little bit, but if for instance we would discover that there's a piece of playground equipment that didn't seem safe, we would tape that area off and sign it as closed, and it would be closed to that that particular feature closed to the public for a period of time. Restroom maybe has a plumbing issue or whatever. It needs to be reasonable, obviously, but I think if it's generally a public health, safety, welfare issue, those things can be determined quite easily, and anything else is going to be spelled out in the operational policy.
I'd like this to have the word temporary closure in it somewhere, if that's what we're gonna do, because I'm a little sensitive to, like, the skate park where Southwood County 2000 put the money up to do that. And if you're gonna come in and close it permanently, I have a problem with that. And I think the intent is mainly for safety, and then somehow you're gonna fix the safety issue, or attempt to. So it would reopen, it wouldn't just close for good.
I don't think the intent ever was permanent closure.
I don't think so either, but if you read this, it doesn't really.
He doesn't spell that out.
Right.
I was just gonna ask the question of whether or not we even need a policy. I think if I recall the conversation, I was on the phone for this, but it was more or less the issue with communication, that there was a breakdown in communication on how and why the reasons for the skate park closed. And there was the game of telephone out in the community about the skate park closing and the city, and I think my point was just we want to avoid that going forward, and we're upfront in communicating, and I think a policy is sort of implied, all talked about that enough that we don't necessarily need a policy. And from my perspective as an individual commissioner, others want to pursue a policy that would support it. but
I would
just
tend
for
to
what
agree with
reasons.
that. If you read this, this is basically what we do.
Yeah, right, it's practice already.
That's
today, yeah.
practice.
Well, he's gonna do it no matter what,
Yeah.
whether there's a policy or not.
Yeah.
But
So
as
let's-
to the communication, that would, I guess, be the thing maybe we need to address as far as what venues you guys get the word out if you're closing on a weekend,
Right.
how we communicate the closure.
Yep. Yeah, I think upstream and downstream, right? I think that was the issue, in looping commissioners in because we get the questions. I think that it sort of was viewed arbitrary, I think, that it was closed and it was because of patrons and there was not a general awareness of how and why. And I
Right.
think it raised issue, with Andy DeWitt in thinking about bigger picture on how we're policing and managing the skate park. And it was a good, healthy conversation on a lot of other issues than I think what maybe the particular issue or referral originally spoke to. More about just communication, open lines of
And if I
communication.
remember correctly, Chief, that was on your Facebook page and then it also was on the Wood County Scanner site. I know that for sure, but I don't know what other venues it was on.
I'm
but-
not sure.
And there wasn't, again, specification of why, it just, it could have been done better, and I think that we beat that dead horse. It's just, I
Well,
don't know
yeah.
if we need to go there with
And
that.
I don't know in some cases how much information you do release to the public. You
Yeah.
don't get into detail.
Right,
you
it's
know.
just, but I think there was a lot of folks that believed that the city was punishing a user group,
Right,
and that
that's
wasn't
not the
necessarily
case.
the case. It was a public safety issue that involved some users or not users, it just members of the public, right? And I think folks believed that there was an incident that, the whole game of telephone when, public safety issues happen. The chief knows better than anyone probably when stuff happens and people make more of it than what it is.
Well, in this age of instant communication too, if it took 4 hours to get a notice out, that's not necessarily unreasonable.
Yeah.
But when people are expecting it 10 seconds after the event occurred and it's still being dealt with, that tends to fly through the community quick, and so really it's understanding too on our part of what's reasonable, as soon as practical and without delay, right?
Especially when it's on a Saturday at 6 o'clock and there's decision makers aren't around.
Right.
Right, so.
No, the conversation wasn't, again, nobody debated the idea to close it down. That, to
Right.
me, makes a lot of sense. What struck me was that somehow Andy was made well aware of it and sent an email to commission members by Sunday, I think. And my response to Andy was, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Yeah, right.
And could I go to the Facebook page and look? Sure, but you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
And so when I responded to the commission, I just said, well, we don't make that decision anyway, but maybe this is something we should be made aware of if a park is shut down, and what's a reasonable time period. I'm not even debating that,
Exactly.
right? It was just a unique circumstance under which it happened on a Saturday, and I think Andy sent the email on a Sunday. And, I'm only speaking for myself, but it was kind of like, what are you even talking about,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So at the last meeting, I think we talked about, them just getting a hold of the supervisor on call, and then they would communicate with Park and Rec, city officials as able.
I can assure you that in the future, when it happens again, that every one of you will know about it as soon as possible.
Well, that's the thing, I guess, communicating it to officials, certainly you're not gonna call every single commission member on the weekend.
No.
You know,
It's just, in the absence of any communication, we need something, so we.
Yes.
I mean, we could
Same.
send a,
Yeah.
Questions, call the police chief. Questions, call the public works
Something, yeah,
supervisor,
yeah.
superintendent, or supervisor on duty, or whatever.
Sure.
Any further discussion? Thank you for all that input. Number 5, discuss park planning process. Plan for all parks, or just Robinson Park? Who does the planning? I think, Tom, you had a referral on a part of this too, I believe.
Yep, and basically mine had to do with Robinson Park, like with the storm damage that we had last July, with all the trees that were wiped out and that, and again, it'd be what needs to be repaired, and/or how to resurrect and make the park better. If there are different things to do or other things to correct, now would be the time to do it, and I had no idea what for sure everything is, but, or what the cost would be. This would be one that, depending on the cost, could fall under trying to have a fundraising type of thing to do. There's the disc golf, there's the horseshoe pit, and some of that stuff I was just looking at here is, you know, back there on whatever page number that is, 17, I guess, Robinson Park, but, you know, the plan for all the parks, which is included in this handout that we have here, but, I guess how to make Robinson Park back to what it was. Obviously, we're not gonna replant all the trees like we had. That's not the intent at all. And there are some who wanna, you know, plant trees and that, but I think now's the time to take a look at what, is there something different to do? I did talk actually to the city band director, and he mentioned that, and I don't know, because I didn't go over it, but just today I talked to him about a low spot or whatever on the stage, if somehow it could be filled in because the water, it settles in and freezes and that, I'm not sure, because I didn't go, I just
Sure.
talked to him this afternoon.
I can speak to that a little bit.
Okay.
So the band shell, along with the warming house and the open shelter, were all constructed in the early 1960s, to the best of our knowledge. And as far as the band shell in particular goes, that was a slab, and there's actually an airspace between the slab and the sand, so the slab actually has settled. There's a dipping going on in the slab on the band shell. That band shell's kind of unique. I mean, we do get some comments, people kind of like it, because of the, architecture, how it was designed, built back in the day. There's potential there for a refurbishment of the existing band shell, and one of the things would be a repouring of that slab. There's some painting, upgrading a PA system, that type of thing that could be done with that,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. And he did mention like a sound system,
Yeah.
that to look at, so there may be things to look at, but I think with another thing to look at, or possibly with that, is with the storms that we've had, we've had the recent one, but we had one almost 20 years ago, the
Yeah.
same type of thing, that went through this, did the same thing
Right.
to it.
And part of that was
for
those trees,
underground
Tom.
wiring to do
Yeah.
something like that, so
Yeah.
where, obviously with light standards, you can have those up, that's gonna, be
Sure.
standing up in the air, but I mean, now would be the time to look at the possibility of underground wiring, so with another storm, such as what we had, that won't happen.
We were a little proactive. Actually, Joe, Paul, and myself went up there, and all the oldest growth trees, and it came to light dramatically once they were cut. Most of those were at the end of their life, and a lot of them were hollow. So we were a little more proactive this time, and we were fairly aggressive in the oldest growth trees that were on the verge of the end of life. We took almost all of that growth out, and when we did cut them down, I would guess, just to throw a number out there, 70% of them were dying from the inside out. They were, so.
And there's a number of them that are left if you go out and visit the park that are currently now standalone, towering white pine that are not substantial in diameter. We're evaluating those, whether it's in the community's best interest to try to maintain those, because there is, they protect each other. And now that they're standalone, we want to try to identify, is there a risk there, or are they okay? And so we may have to remove a few of those other standalone ones. We may not. We're in the process of evaluating those structures.
Yeah, and I think with, and I'm just talking about Robinson Park.
Right.
From my point of view here tonight, but, the usage of ball fields there. The softball field that the girls use there, I don't know, it's used a lot. How, I don't have any idea the number of dates and that. The field that's up towards the railroad tracks, I don't know what usage that gets. To me, that'd be part of to look at what an overall, plan for the park. does that, I don't know if there's any organized league at all that uses that other park at all.
RISA still
anymore.
uses that.
Hmm?
RISA still uses those
Well,
fields.
up at the tracks, okay.
I think that's kind of evolved into their practice.
More practice,
Yeah.
more practice.
But during tournaments, I know they were using it, had used it last year because of the
We
weather.
lease it to them, yeah. So they have, I think, exclusive, I don't remember. the
I don't know if we
lease
change it
option.
to priority or exclusive.
Yeah.
I think we changed it to non-exclusive.
Non-exclusive. It's just they have priority use.
Priority use.
Yeah.
So, from, I guess from my point of view is take an overall look at the park and see what can be done. T, I don't know if you have anything to add. T. Poggle lives right across the street, so she's a direct neighbor of the park, so I don't know if she.
Well, fortunately, I was in Canada when it happened, so, but you've done a wonderful job over there right now. I walk it pretty much every day.
Thank you.
And it looks, I've even told some of the workers over there, planting the trees and clearing it and leveling things out is wonderful. The ping pong table over there, I was looking at that and it's really a neat thing. Ping pong's big and I like it, but people wreck it or steal it and that. And I wonder if not like our bikes that we use where you put a credit card in to get something, if something like that's possible, so people can go play it and have fun in the park. And I know the basketball hoops have been, tortured from people, but I think the Bronx is cleaning up a bit. That's when I dubbed Robinson down on the road when I was on council was the Bronx, and they have cleaned up the park, the disc golfers had. And they'll come and they'll use our trash can or something, and I tell them to. And I think they're friendly, I think they're nice, they're green, they want to keep the park going. And it is a wonderful park to have to do things with. Just some of the updates that you're looking at, some of the more physical things of the basketball and the table tennis, things like that is a nice idea. I know a lot of the girls baseball and that, my neighbors' children are into that, and they do use the front diamond, and the north diamond is used for some little league when they have tournaments and such like that, which is it's great to see all that going on. It's really desirable to have youth back in that area, and it's cleaning up quite a bit. They do a good job. The police around here, we know what's going on. I mean, we've lived there for 37 years, so it's no mystery of how it's been and what it used to be, and it's not an easy place to patrol, but they do keep covers on it, and there are more kids going into that park every day, and it just makes me smile hearing them all. Some of the things that the disc golfers did say that they mentioned was, can you leave these big trees here? It's so nice to put our bags on them. So nice to lean on them when we're sitting here. So that might be an idea of, if you're looking at benches, they do, because they have that, I don't know what you call your garden there, the master gardeners on the corner.
Yep, the planters. Mhm.
What is it called?
The planters
Yes.
by the sign, yeah.
They have that there, and I know that's kind of a monster. It kind of looks like something that belongs in a cemetery. But the rest of the stuff, benches and that might be a good idea over there, because it's kind of like the third hole, and people congregate and regroup from the first hole, second hole, then the third hole, and then they move on down. And it's used more and more and more. I bet you there was 50 people out there this weekend using it. And I just say keep up the good work, because you're doing a great job. It looks good. All those roots, there's 2 roots left in there, and I think my dog will have them out by the end of winter, because he goes over there and that's the first thing he does is pull on it. So, it is
Get them on the
good.
payroll.
Yeah.
Community service.
Yeah, and I just thank you for doing that. That's a nice job, nice work. There was a lot to do.
I was looking at this from a broader perspective, so I'm just gonna refer to this chapter 4 on page 16. This needs assessment. So And I don't know how up to date, there's a lot of items on there, I only see one mark completed, I doubt that that's true, there's probably others, but I was going down the path that this is all the parks, and could this be sort of updated? Also answers our first topic, hopefully, about bench. But if that could be updated, and then, actually these bullet points, I'll fess up to them, these are mine. So if we had all the parks included, I don't know if it's just staff that does the planning, or if some of that goes outside, I'm not sure how you did this original one. And then you could ask the user groups, you know, most of them are probably at Robinson and Mead. There's probably others, but make sure you ask the users group for their input. I don't know about the funding, so you're gonna get some FEMA dollars probably, and are those specific to what happened at, say, Robinson Park or each area?
So the FEMA dollars are used to reimburse the city for time and expenses related.
Right.
And ultimately, it's up to the common council. But at least staff intent is to suggest that the tasks that weren't able to be performed and the projects that weren't able to be performed due to staff maintaining those park areas and chipping all the brush, that we're able to somehow do those projects because they were needed to be done. A handful of small parks items, we didn't get any of our chip seal and very little of our crack fill done, so
So there's not like we're gonna be a pot of money to work out, and that's fine, but part of it would be then if we did this, you're gonna look at setting priorities, and then we have to decide how they get funded. But it's not just Robinson, it's,
No.
and Robinson might be the priority, I don't know, but at least we would have a better picture of what we have and what we wanna do.
And Robinson comes to mind, but, you know, that's the one I think that took the most damage
Oh, by far,
out of all the parks.
by far.
And my reasoning for, you know, to keep bringing it up is now is the time, maybe the time is to take a look at,
because it is different now.
yeah. What would be not necessarily maybe a new plan, but what, an updated, a really updated plan of what we want the park to be.
And on the other side, Demets probably doesn't need anything,
Right.
so
Right.
that's fine.
Yeah,
But
right.
we don't really have that big view, at least I don't.
So, right, well, your question is part of the process, updating this plan, and then utilizing that as kind of your roadmap, as it
Right.
were.
Right.
You know, and if Robinson is the one that we pick that we're gonna start with, for example, then so be it. I mean, but at least it's documented with where, here we are now, and this is where we wanna go.
And it's probably useful for the sports complex. I mean, those people are doing things because of not having facilities here. It might even be out in Kellner area, whatever, but that's fine. At least here's what it is, and if we're not gonna accommodate you, they know what to do.
Robinson
Or
Park.
they'll have a voice and say, why don't you do this?
Robinson Park was the premier park, that's probably the oldest park, I think, isn't it, Tom? I mean, it's,
Yeah, I think so.
and there's been a lot of new parks with some of the same amenities and
You know,
stuff, things to look at.
it was a park that had a lot of different uses.
Yeah.
I mean, there were car shows that were there, there was, well, from Labor Day events to other, you know, big picnics like that were held there, besides the shelter that'd be rented out and that type of, the band shell, that there was, you know, it's not just the city band, there's other groups that do perform there during the summertime at different events, so it's a park that does, a lot of different things take place there. And I wasn't aware of that, how much use that ballpark on that end got used anymore. I mean, it's a nice park, ballpark. So, you know, I'm glad to hear that, because that was one of the questions I had, so.
The shelter house, so now, I know that was always being rented out years ago. Dawn, is there still a fee on that? Did that get rented out a lot, or?
Book solid.
It is, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
So is the outdoor rec plan the vehicle under which we accomplish what we're talking about?
So how it rolls up into a bigger plan is the city has a comprehensive plan that we have to, by state law, to pass, I think, every 10 years. And so was the auspice for this. This was done by North Central Regional Planning Commission, as you see on the front cover. They offer this resource to municipalities that are members, and the city hasn't been a member for a number of years for a variety of reasons. I think Wood County, after some lobbying, will now become a member at a county level, so we'll have access to them. One thing we've offered to them, because they've asked municipalities, what would the priorities be for North Central Regional Planning Commission? One has been a countywide outdoor rec plan. Now the challenge will be getting our piece of that outdoor rec planning, and Regional Planning Commission is known for very, as what you see here, very bare bones, right? It's a cursory review, kind of a desktop planning exercise where they're coming, doing a site visit, and then they offer these recommendations. We did, at a staff level, our community development department went through and updated this, I think in 2015, it says on the front, and they did add more complete type things as more of just an exercise. But I appreciate the bigger conversation, because I think previously we had talked about just saying, let's focus on Robinson. Maybe community development staff could lead what they call a charrette, where they have user groups come together, they talk about their ideas, they maybe put a plan together. But given the age of this, and given the zoo, and given all the other improvements that we've either have money for or are making happen, that maybe it's time for a more comprehensive plan update, and that would require an outside resource. Regional Planning Commission's an option. I don't know if we'd necessarily get what we're talking about out of them, just based upon their capacity. They don't have a whole lot of planning staff on staff. So we may want to go with not all that different than we saw proposals for the zoo master plan, and decided to not necessarily go that route for cost reasons, and I think the value and that sort of thing. That would be an exercise we could consider in this regard, that does consider more broadly all the parks, and then we prioritize, we put in there whatever our scope would be, that we do provide a priority of what park to start with. Robinson being our largest, the most kind of renowned, maybe the most ripe for some refurbishment and reinvestment. We do have some FEMA dollars that are being applied toward underground lighting or underground electrical, and just some ancillary things. And then we also have some, if I recall, some hail money that might be able to be tapped. I don't know if we tapped all that for the improvements insurance proceeds from the hailstorm. We had some reserved for future improvements. I don't know.
I don't know how much is left, but I've talked to Tim on that.
But certainly, as we think about the room tax outlay, as a funding source too, we generally take those projects and kind of, on occasion, we'll spend that down. But we have $375,000 in reserves for park improvements. That, while we have a plan, we haven't necessarily gone through an exercise to say, here's what we want to spend that money on over 2 years or 3 years. That replenishes every year. So I guess that would be my response. Would be it.
Is that something we could get done in a lower cost option by working with like Midstate or UWSP or something like that?
Yeah, I think you'll get more of an elementary type level, like Regional Planning Commission will offer, more of a sophomoric type versus a professional plan, but maybe that's what we want. I don't know what the commission is thinking.
If I recall correctly, these guys did it, I think, 3 times in a row.
Okay.
And if I recall, the last time they did it, we had a meeting, and the basic feeling was we weren't getting our bang for the buck, correct?
With Regional Planning
Yeah,
Commission in general?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they just are, they're a mile wide and offer a lot of good services, but they're not very comprehensive.
That's how I recalled it.
They're not in depth. Yeah,
So
we
you're
would-
talking about an organization even leading like the community input sessions and all that stuff?
We would probably
Talking-
do a hybrid where we use some of our staff, our planning staff here, but that's gonna be based upon availability. And then the other question is, if that's a priority, great, and it works for their staff, but we would probably do an RFP for firms. That would, you'd get your MSAs, you get 6 or 8 different
Yeah.
firms that would pitch. But it's gonna come at a much more significant cost than UWSP or Central Regional Planning Commission. But if that's what the commission wants as a guide, I think as, working with staff, we want some direction. We want the commission to be more engaged with saying, here's what we should be spending our resources on. And by having some new commissioners and some, rounding out the slate of slots, I think is a great thing now to be able to have this discussion in a place where we haven't had the slots filled or haven't had the ideas and perspectives that all of you have now kind of bring into the table.
And master planning can be done both globally with all of our parks, but also with focus on a particular park.
Right.
If we don't have infinite resources, you know, we did a nice master plan for, you know, Mead Field. And how long that plan is valid for, it, you know, it depends on a number of things. But we have a plan there. And I think that's a great example if there's a donor that's looking to do some playground equipment, for example. We've got something that fits that, within that plan, or someone's interested in doing a community shelter building with restrooms. We've got that location picked out already, so.
Or a bench.
Or a bench.
Yeah.
Picnic table, yeah.
But to select any one of the parks and say, okay, well, you know, we've got some generic items on here, some general improvements that we want to do, but we're going to focus on
Yeah.
Robinson Park and master plan that one. That becomes a bigger component of this, and you can bite this thing off in manageable pieces and still get a lot accomplished.
But still have a firm provide the overall blueprint for parks in general. And I guess what I would toss out is, it doesn't hurt to ask the question, because we don't spend any money to do an RFP. Or very little, you pay staff to get something together.
Yeah.
And we can look at what that looks like, you know, in terms of dollars and cents, because I'm sure nobody's gonna be chomping at the bit to spend some crazy number on just getting a plan for the parks.
I would agree.
But if that number is manageable, then I would agree. Then I think you can look at what you've got. If this plan comes together, whether it be comprehensive or a little bit more rudiment, whatever, you know, whatever the happy medium is, then you can say, okay, is Robinson Park where we're gonna go? And we all agree, yep. So, and then that might be much more detailed. Community listening sessions and input and donors and, you know, comprehensive planning from there. But I don't, you know, being new to the area as well, some of the parks that are listed here, I haven't even stepped foot in, right? Other ones that I've been in with regularity. And so the question to me around having a comprehensive plan, to me is like a no-brainer. I think we need to, but I don't know that, I don't wanna go out there and say, well, we're willing to spend $100 grand to make that happen, you know, or whatever that number is. But if we do an RFP and firms come back with something that's reasonable to give us that blueprint, to me, that would be money well spent, because you're going to have that for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, this one was good, and it's fine, it gives you great understanding, but providing that direction around where you wanna go it's a little bit lacking in that regard, and in 2016.
And I think just a landscape scan around what are the relevancy, you know, you ask some questions about users and to the extent these facilities are programmed.
Yep.
You know, I think just thinking out loud, Sandlot, Robinson are probably the two that are the most significant that don't necessarily have a vision for what's next. I mean, we've made improvements to Sandlot, we've added, you know, repaved surfaces there. I mean, incremental improvements, but I think you're right on. We need some guiding document. It may not be on the specificity of this, where this kind of offered some suggestions, recommendations, but, you know, to our benefit, we've done a lot of maintenance things that have been recommended in here. They just haven't been ticked off the list. Yeah.
And there's some with which we wouldn't do a darn thing.
Yeah, right. Right, yeah,
And
yeah,
to be able-
Gaynor Park, Lion Park, I mean, a lot of those are established facilities that are really well used and don't need a lot of maintenance.
Yeah, and there may be specific activities that have been, you know, that the city's been requested to consider facilitating, that we could select a park and at least deal with it, you know.
So dog
Pickleball
park,
is one that,
how about the dog park?
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it should be within this scope, it might not work, but,
Right.
because I think we talked about Sandlot at one point, possibility.
As a potential.
And there's, you know, referrals at the county level to the extent that the city and county systems are speaking or coordinating who's doing what, and that I think is important too.
Yep.
So do you want a motion to begin an RFP process, or don't we wanna do that now, or what do you think? What do we need?
I think we need to come back with a scope. So I think initiating an RFP, particularly to come back with a draft scope that would include, you know, encapsulate this conversation, and then we can tweak it before issuing the RFP formally, and then the commission can bless that. I think that would be direction enough, based upon what we've talked about. You know, we're down a planning director right now, community development director, so that's part of the capacity around doing it all internally. You know, amongst all the other economic development planning stuff that the department's working on. So I think going external with a scope, and we define the scope, would be appropriate at this stage from my perspective. I don't know if Joe or Matt have. And that's the direction we've been sort of looking for, I think. where are we gonna take the master plan?
Yeah, I would agree. At this point, just because we are, well, where we are at with our aquatics project, and we will be giving that a lot of attention as we get that thing completed and opening. I don't think there's gonna be a whole lot of staff time available to dedicate to this. But I do think that there's a definite need. I think staff can, with the commission's support and review, the staff could develop a preliminary scope, and the commission can fine tune that, and, we can decide then, what consultants can, what services can be provided
Yep.
and move forward that way.
So you're talking about, you would establish kind of the rudimentary aspects of the RFP, what we're asking for.
Yep.
We'd talk about that around here, then we'd send it out, and so we have $0 into getting that back.
Exactly.
Some potential bids.
I think an emphasis,
idea.
like has been mentioned, on Robbie, and thinking about Sandlot, and if we incorporate some of the other things with riverfront park spaces that have already been done, I mean, there's not a lot that's been mentioned that we need to do in these spaces, the master plan at need, if there's a relevance of question there, but I think we've covered the scope, it just needs to be written.
I would move that we do that.
Second, third.
Motion by Craig, second by Alderman Tom, to begin a scope process by city staff and bring it back to the commission. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, a lot of good input there.
Thank you for dropping in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Good luck to your dog on that rut,
I'll give you a report on that, okay?
Perfect.
Okay, we move to item number 6. Consider referral from Joe Terry to review and adopt a user fee schedule for our new pool facility. We got,
Sure, so I have some things in your packet here, and this is kind of a dual referral, both for the commission and the finance committee. Has everyone had a chance to review the referral document?
Yep.
Okay. So the fee schedule is kind of combined, or comprises of two areas. One is the general staff recommendation for the fee schedule. The other is for the inclusive resident status, and the latter is probably better served by the finance committee, but since they're related, really wanted to get a recommendation from this committee before I meet with the finance committee tomorrow evening.
So just help me here. The finance committee's role is they want to make sure that enough revenue comes in?
Both.
or-
Revenue and financing, right? Budget, expenditures and revenues.
Okay.
So,
But we could recommend something and they could say no. I don't like the
That's-
process,
that's a-
let's put it that way.
that's a little more of a discussion for our city attorney. I believe that the ordinances call out that the Parks Commission generally makes the decisions related to parks activities, and
I get that, so that's why I'm confused why it's recommended that property and finance.
the second part, inviting the other municipalities to potentially participate and help fund the construction of the park to have resident status.
That's their role, that's what you're saying?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I think another way of explaining it would be operationally, the commission has jurisdiction on rate structures, fee structures, policy, and then the finance and property and council, it's a great debate, I'll put it that way, but the finance and finance committee and the council has a jurisdiction around, as Joe said, externally, and then subsidy, right? The commission doesn't actually budget a subsidy, the city general fund does, and that's kind of the interplay. I mean, yeah, it's gray, but that's the black and white, I think, is the way I would explain it, is operationally, and then kind of the backstopping of the city council.
If this had said it was recommended that they do this for the other area user fees, that would have been fine for me.
Yeah, well, it was really gray, and, you know, in our discussions with staff and the city attorney, you know, we bounced all over the place on this, so we thought, well, we're gonna bring it before both.
That's good.
And play it
I think it's
safe.
good to have the blessing of the commission in terms of, there's a lot of question in the public, what a rate's gonna be, and I think the more exposure we give this discussion, the better.
Okay.
So if it's okay with the committee, I'm gonna roll through this just for our audience that may be watching as well, because they likely didn't get a chance to review this if it is available. Obviously, the fee and use schedule is an important component of successful operations of the pool and the rec complex. When we develop these fees, our staff goals include the following: that we minimize public operational subsidies, yet have fees that are affordable for city residents. That non-resident rates are determined carefully to balance being financially appropriate while maximizing the facility use and avoiding overcrowding. Try to operate at nearly maximum capacity, and that's desirable for concession sales and minimizing the operation per capita use. Developing a well-attended fee-based and special programming activities to promote the long-term success of the facility. A fee schedule that addresses financial needs but is concise and easy to administrate, and encourages the purchase of season passes. So attached to this is a couple of sheets that includes fee schedules from comparable facilities. We've listed them and tried to list everything that they include. And so you can see there's a wide variety of ways that these different facilities charge fees. There's some logistical, also attachment B. I wanted to compare household incomes to see what our household incomes are compared to those same municipalities, and evaluate if we are to utilize or use some of their fee structure as a model. Does it make sense to use it here as well? So those are attached in the document, and in general, we're in the ballpark. Our city median income is a little bit low comparatively, but as a region, we're right in the ballpark. So I think these other facilities are equitable comparables. Logistical challenges for the part-time employees are also considered, such as most of the pool staff will be students that won't have significant retail, cashier, or that type of experience. So the fee schedule should be developed to avoid inconsistencies in determining residency or any other potential mistakes that our summer help at the pool could otherwise easily make. One of the other things that we're suggesting here is a resident, non-resident differentiation in the rental of the Four Seasons shelter. Our current park shelters don't have resident, non-resident rates, and that's because those facilities were generally built from grants and not directly from taxpayer revenues. So staff recommends and believes that city residents or neighboring communities, if they're allowed to choose to participate financially, who actually paid for the facilities deserved appropriate rates, and then those that didn't would have to pay some extra fees.
Inappropriate rates.
Right. Another suggestion, and these aren't universal, are non-swimmer or guardian fees to use the facility. I know in my experience with the pool, oftentimes you get a grandparent asking if they can sit on the deck, and depending on the facility, a lot of times the answer is no. If you're gonna sit on the deck, you pay a fee just like any other patron. I believe there's a reason to have a non-swimmer fee rate, and because there's babysitters or guardians that want to observe their family from the pool deck, but aren't going to use the pool facility, but they are still using the facility. They add to the head count that would otherwise prohibit you know, if we're near capacity, we may not be able to allow some people in. So we felt that a non-swimmer or guardian fee is accommodating and appropriate.
Can I get in as a non-swimmer and swim?
No.
I mean,
They
how do
didn't
you?
have bands.
Wristbands or what?
How do you play?
We haven't determined that yet, but generally you're on the deck in street clothes,
No, that's thinking.
right? If you're,
What if it's 95 and you're, you know what I'm saying?
well, you're in a.
You're not gonna be wearing jeans and tennis shoes, I wouldn't think.
Well, shorts and a t-shirt or something, but, you know, it's largely gonna be enforced by our lifeguards, and
So do you think they wouldn't come if you charged them the swimmer rate?
they'll get frustrated, I'll tell you that from experience.
I guarantee.
They just wanna sit and watch the kids with their at the swim lessons, they're only
I'm
gonna
not
be there
doing
for an
anything.
hour,
Yep.
you know, that type of thing, and I dealt with that for, you know, about 18 years previously, my previous employment to the city, and
Yeah.
so I think it would be a good compromise from either not allowing them or having them very frustrated and standing outside the fence trying to look in versus a nominal fee for them to watch their loved ones.
That's a guarantee. I do question, though, people potentially taking advantage of that
Yeah,
aspect.
and, you know, and I think-
Asking lifeguards and so forth, you know, it's not gonna be Wisconsin Dells out there.
They'll do it.
They may, and, you know, and the idea there is it is intended to be a guardian
Yeah.
fee, right? So somebody shows up, so I'm not gonna swim, I'm just gonna go sun on the deck. Yeah, sorry. You know, it's, I'm here with.
Well, they're
my-
with somebody else, you're saying. That's one of the caveats before they get in.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, could that be addressed like with a wristband situation, different color or something?
Could be, yeah, I think there's a number of ways that we can, work on the logistics to resolve questions to that effect. And it may be a work in progress too, there's things that we may try that, you know, given the staff, their experience, ability to communicate, understand the rules and policies, we may have to be creative during the season itself. What we're proposing, just for simplicity, is that if you don't have a punch card, it's $6 at the door. But the residents could purchase a day pass punch card for $20. That gives you 5 entries, which makes it a $4 entry fee for a day at the pool. And again, part of the reason for that is we have to determine where we're gonna have those items purchased. And it may or may not be at the pool. You know, we may have them come to our parks office and make those purchases so that, you know, we can validate that the residents, same thing for the season passes or whatever. And we may develop a method where, yep, we've got some talented summer help lifeguards and managers at the pool, and they may be totally competent to look that up and make those determinations. But oftentimes that resident question becomes an issue. And if I'm a grandparent and I live in the city and I pay my taxes and I want to get passes for my grandkids, many times I've heard that argument that, well, I should be able to get them at a resident rate because I live here, and do the grandkids physically also live there? So those are the types of debates that I really don't want to have our summer kids having to deal with. So hence the punch card idea for resident versus non-resident rate for day use.
So if you just show up there, you will just pay the day.
$6 you're in.
$6.
Anybody don't matter.
Anybody don't
All
matter.
right.
Then I've got a recommendation for the guardian, resident non-swimmer guardian and resident non-resident non-swimmer guardian, $2 per day and $4 per day. Season passes, resident single for $60, and a resident family $120 for 4, plus $10 per person in excess of 4. The non-resident is essentially double that, $120 for a single And 200, again, that was one of those situations where we don't want to price it so that we don't get non-residents to show. And staff just felt that 200 would be something that people would still be interested in. Wouldn't price it out of the market, so to speak. But we really want to have the pool used as much as possible, so that was not quite
Emphasize
one.
the season passes from an administrative standpoint too, right?
Any thought to seniors being free?
Well,
You know the question's gonna be asked, Tom.
you know, and part of that is just the complexity. You know, what we didn't address either is, what about infants?
They got all the money.
You know, if it's gonna be 2 or less,
Yeah, some of these are 2 and under free.
some of them have that as free
We're
as
still
well.
working on that?
Well, that's in part up to the commission to decide that. I prefer we try to keep it as simple as possible. I think 2 and under for free, that makes sense. You've got a family and you wanna bring the toddlers and you've still got a real youngster there. Not to burden the families with those costs.
I mean, even these family things, I don't know how you police that. They could buy for 4 and it's a different 4 every time, or, I
I
don't
We've
think
got
the-
methods to-
I think the system at Appleton, when we toured Appleton, they did headshots. The Parks Department did photos when they
Well, they
sold
had
the
photos.
season
Oh,
passes,
really?
yeah. Because I think they're a scan barcode. if I'm not
Yes, when you
mistaken.
scan it, the
Go to
picture
water,
shows
yeah.
up on the screen.
Yeah, like the Y,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what Appleton used, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Retinal scan, we do retinal scan.
Retinal scan, yeah, Face ID, yeah.
Fingerprints.
You can do it on your cell phone, you should be able to do it at the pool, right?
Yeah.
Because really this whole resident and non-resident thing adds complexity.
Yeah.
It does, but it is a necessity. It really is. You know, the citizens of the city of Wisconsin Rapids are paying quite a bit for this facility. And it is not fair for them if people from outside the community would pay the same rates.
But
You know.
if these people, if these areas signed up,
Then they'd be contributing financially.
not,
the same
not
manner
for
as-
the daily operation, that's what you mean?
No,
That's a
that-
separation?
We'll get to that, but it's both.
Okay.
There's the Four Seasons indoor shelter. We're recommending $150 a day, plus the $100 refundable key and cleaning deposit. A non-resident would be $250 a day, plus the same deposit. That is different from our other shelters, but again, generally our other shelters were not built by the taxpayers. It was a donation and the city's maintaining it.
Joe, is that also resident / season pass holder?
You know, we talked about that. My concern is that adds a level of complexity,
Okay.
but certainly, we certainly could try to
Just wanting to
deal with it.
get back to the incentivizing those season pass sales if there's an
Right.
incentive there.
Yeah. The sale panel cabanas, there's 2 of those, looking at a per hour. Now, there are plenty of deck shelter areas also where someone, you just use them, first come, first serve. But we did include 2, kind of one on each corner for, exclusive reservables. So if you had a family event, you wanted to have your own cabana, you could do that. So 25 an hour or 20 with a season pass. And then the family shelter area, which, let's see here. That's the one by the mechanical building. So there's $10 per bay. There's 3 bays over there. Or $20 an hour for all 3 bays if you have a season pass. So if you were having a birthday party for the kids and you were going to do something for a couple hours there, and you had a season pass, $50 or $60, and you could have your birthday party right there on the deck under shelter. And then the family area shelter, that's a smaller, that's the rental shelter area when the Four Seasons shelter isn't being reserved. That would be $25 an hour or $20 an hour with the season pass. It's a little bit A little bit smaller, it's kind of 2 bays, but it's very convenient because it's right next to the concession stand. You're right next to the bathhouse. It's a great spot.
Is there a rate set for the outdoor shelter? Or is it just gonna kind of follow our Lion Park, Robinson Park? It's not quite as large as
Actually, Ed's
Robinson Park,
included
but-
that in here, and that's something.
I
we
mean, it's
should
open,
definitely-
available for when people wanna use it in general, but.
If it is reserved though, we wanna probably use the same structure as Robinson Park.
I think for many of you, it begs the desire to go on a tour. If you haven't walked by it or watched the drone videos, Tom's been through it a few times, and given a couple of tours, but we should, if weather cooperates, we'll have to give a tour so you know, I think, better close-up of what these.
Yeah, I think if weather cooperates and there's interest, we could do a tour whenever. It's cold out, but, the buildings are, enclosed enough, there's no heat or anything there, but we could certainly take a walk through and you can get a pretty good idea of what, the building facilities are going to be like, and then the deck layout as well. It's certainly worth looking at.
One area that may be a concern, and we actually ran into this in our park facilities rentals, when we used to rent half days at Helen's house, for instance, is when one user group gets done, clean up.
Yeah.
If you're renting per the hour, are you gonna have the staff time to have somebody there after each group, get it clean and prepared for the next hour?
And if we wanted to do something half days, that's fine too.
I just know
Whatever-
what we ran into, and it was a group would leave and the place would be a mess, and there was no time to get somebody in there
Ready.
and get it clean before the next user group came in. Just something to keep in mind, we may have to tweak that a little bit.
Yeah, and half-day reservations might be appropriate with an hour
Sure.
between them,
In
so
between
that the kids can get out and get that all swept up and cleaned up.
Right. It's never a good user experience when you rent something and you come in and it's,
Well, and the pool day is generally broken up into a, early afternoon, late afternoon session anyway, so.
Sure.
Is there gonna be any carry-ins allowed? You're gonna have less of that issue then.
Right. Would we rather go half days? It'd certainly be easier to administrate.
That might make some
I
sense.
think half will be used more.
What fee structure would you like to see for a half day?
Well, if you got $25 an hour, do $100 a half day, 4 hours. And 80 with a pass.
does that, I guess, blend in with what our potential open hours of use are with the facility?
I think so.
4-hour chunks, give or take.
Do maybe 80 then, just to keep the costs at it.
I think we were talking
And seeing that the one closest to the
10 to 8 or something.
the second one is smaller, but a little better location. If you did that the same rate, again, it'd be easy to administrate. So 80 per half day. And then open shelter, again, that's outside the pool, but open shelter, we would take a look at our Robinson Park. Dawn, do you recall what that rate is?
It's $100
100 for the day?
For a full day?
for a full day. And we don't do any non-resident.
Yeah, and I think for administrative purposes that we want to be consistent there. Just make it 100 a day.
But that's, if they wanted to use the shelter and swim, then you're talking, $100 a day is just for the open shelter.
That's just the open shelter.
Right.
That's
What does it offer for amenities, just power? We built anything, power and seating?
Yeah, power seating, and you're right next to the playground, and you've got the outdoor fountain pad as
I think
well.
it's probably a bit more valuable than Robbie is in terms of amenities there.
But it's smaller too.
Yeah.
Smaller. What do you think?
I don't know, I'm not the pricing guru, but I just, I guess from a comparable, what other facilities are available. I don't know, have we looked at NEPCO? That's not comparable here, but,
That's pretty.
250
that's pretty reasonable. I guess the question is there a desire to break up day parts? You know, there's only 70, some summer days, there's only, 4, 8, 12, 16 summer Saturdays. Is there value to offering more availability to the public by doing half days? When are people more apt to do a gathering? Morning till like 1 o'clock and then they do afternoons, or do people want like the outdoor shelter, they want it all day?
Well, then you'd have the cleaning issue as well.
Yeah.
You know, I think one thing we could do is try it, and if the thing is absolutely book solid, well, maybe we take a look at breaking it up or adjusting the rate a little bit.
Wonder if
Because it's gonna be a
Sarah
beautiful,
Park is
beautiful shelter.
Yeah, that's gonna be nice.
Yeah.
Sarah Park Shelter is that kind of similar, isn't it? I don't know what they charge,
Is it
but-
the one that's kind of on
Yeah.
the east side? East, by their
That's
tennis courts?
That's east of the pool.
East of the pool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a nice shelter.
Yeah, it is.
The cabanas do not have any deposit, like for a cleaning deposit or anything?
Should probably do an hour at least, right, for deposit?
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if maybe like a $25 just to encourage them to clean up.
Yep.
Do you wanna do those per half day also?
I think those are probably, if a kid's party,
I mean, you might just be there for an hour or two.
that's what I'm thinking, especially if you break pool into sessions, right, those are the open swim into sessions.
Probably plus 25 for clean deposit.
Yeah, easy.
Before we get into the next section, are there any more comments or questions or suggestions on the pool specific rates?
Hours of operation?
You know, Mary and I talked about that, and I think, is it 11 to 7 or noon to 7 or
That
something
seems
like
to be
that?
consistent with what all these other facilities are.
Right. We certainly have opportunities for AM programming. We do have boilers that are heating the water, so the water temps are gonna be such, and the pool is configured for programming. So I do anticipate that we'll be scheduling some, morning activities. The lazy river is 4 feet deep, and I think it's 20 laps to the mile, designed specifically for walk against the current activities, things like that. So there's things that we can do during the morning hours, programming wise, but we also need time to make sure that the pool's clean and, we've got time for those maintenance activities. And if we're predominantly using the kids for that, we've got to keep that in mind as well.
Do you want to add that to that, I mean, as a suggested hours of operation, do we want to add that to that, or is that a different topic for a different time?
I think it's a different topic, but if for the purpose of setting fees, if the public's interested, 11 to 7?
11 to 7.
For open swim, right?
Sure.
I might have missed it, but for the shelter areas, are you allowing carry-ins for those areas? Because I'm just thinking, people want to rent them to have a party, they probably want to bring cake and, I just wonder how that's gonna.
That question will come up for sure.
Yeah.
And I would think cake we would, but I don't think we'd want, beverages or anything
No beverages.
generally,
No beverages, right?
right.
Yeah.
That's
Bag of
the whole
chips or
purpose of the
something like
concession
that.
stand is selling those concessions, but I could certainly see where a birthday cake could be allowed.
Yeah, beverages will be an issue.
Right.
For one thing, even the bottle type, you start getting glass involved and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there little kitchenettes in there? Are there little kitchenettes in there where they can do stuff on a plan? I thought I saw there.
So there's just kind of a general prep area inside the shelter.
Oh, yeah.
Now, if you rented the Four Seasons shelter,
Yeah.
that's different.
Yeah. That has.
That, as long as you keep everything inside, you could bring your picnic lunch and
Okay.
and have your family
The
reunion.
inside one?
Yeah. As long as it stays inside, right?
And the outdoor shelter, of course, too. That would
Right,
be
that's
carried
outside
in.
the fence.
Outside the fence, yeah. But I think in terms of the menu, we were talking about fee and revenue from a concession standpoint, programming that, those bays, as you're calling, or family
Right.
area shelter for those parties is critical, right?
Right.
Your pizza packages, your,
Yeah.
you know, your bags, you know, whatever you can imagine, I suppose that's gonna sell, you wanna price that to not, to promote the sale of it
Correct.
versus the carry-in and that, I think, too.
Right. And I have not met with our various reps. It sounds like Holiday Wholesale is the desired food supplier for a lot of these other facilities. They do an excellent job in both supplying when needed, short turnaround, and you know, offering suggestions on menu items that are selling great in other locations. So we'll be looking at that, but those will be establishing, I think, a little different time and coming up with, there's maybe a general plan for, you know, what types of margins are desirable in order to make concessions work well.
Would that then include like a possible package for a birthday party group, like if you have
Right.
10 kids or whatever, that would be?
Yep.
Because I'm sure that question will come up as well.
Yes. Do you think there'd be discounted rates for bigger groups like that? Or-
Yeah, absolutely, I mean, we talk about any of that.
Yeah. So-
What is anticipated, how many staff members is that place gonna have to have?
Well, you'd asked me that. I have that number, but
Okay.
I don't have it on the top of my head.
That's okay.
Probably look at the plan based upon.
It's
number of
around 20,
chairs,
I think.
probably, yeah.
Pardon?
It's around 20.
Okay.
It's a good number. You've got, maybe it's not quite that many. You've got you don't have to have lifeguards
And everything
supervising the slides.
Oh.
You need a slide attendant for those. I'll
That's okay.
I'll look that up and
I
get it
just
to you.
curious, I thought.
I'd like to see reduced or free rates for senior citizens and veterans. I know you want it simple, but I'm just tossing that out there. It's not in there, it is what it is.
Whether you're a resident or not.
Well, it could be, whatever. I don't have a problem with like a grandfathered sort of thing. I don't think that it should be just, you know, come one, come all, but for residents for sure.
Okay. What do you
What's the
think?
definition of a senior?
Yeah.
Whatever we think, 60 plus, 62 plus, doesn't matter to me.
Most of them are 62.
And the
Show
discount
us your
probably only
Medicare
on the
card?
season pass?
What's that?
Season pass,
I don't care how we accomplish it, I just think we should pay deference to that.
half price?
He said free.
Reduced or free.
Oh, sorry.
There's value to a facility. I mean,
We do half price,
I
half
think
off.
half price would be
non-resident,
nice.
yeah.
I think they should pay something.
Yeah.
yeah, there's value to the facility. There's certainly,
So half price for individuals 62 plus? What about veterans?
I would do only half on residents. I think, to your point about priority over resident, for resident,
Yeah,
62 and over in military.
unless your community plays the game, which you're gonna talk about still, right?
And you,
Correct.
well, you include military in that
Yeah.
grouping, yeah. Yeah, I'm fine with
and that's a single pass, right?
For the,
Yeah, not for the family, for
Not
the person.
Yep.
I just think of grand and grandpa coming with the grandkids, you know, and if they live in town, they wanna pay for the grandkids, they could bring themselves in, and it's,
Good
Half
point.
price then,
Half
right,
for
for
them, yeah.
for single.
Pretty consistent, I think, with what you're seeing too at other pools, now seeing the chart.
Anything else related to the fee schedule? If not, I'll move to the next section. So the next section is inclusive resident status. And this is something that as staff, we've talked about really since the initial study, is that this facility is gonna serve the whole region. In our analysis, it demonstrated that we're gonna be serving a population base of really 60,000, which is a lot bigger than just Wisconsin Rapids. And developing opportunities for surrounding municipalities to be inclusive and have a resident rate structure. And I operated, Matt's operated the pool here, I operated the pool in Port Edwards, so I know very well what the annual operating costs are, and what's being proposed here is very competitive. You'd never be able to open a pool or operate a pool for anywhere near this. So, and then you also don't have the headaches of the insurance and the hiring and just logistics. So, for a municipality that might otherwise be considering what can we do for our kids, this might be very attractive.
Has this been shopped around any of these municipalities yet, or no?
We've had some very preliminary discussions, very preliminary with Port Edwards and Grand Rapids. Very preliminary, just to see if it's an absolute no, or just what the feedback was. And the feedback was, well, we're interested in talking. So we thought, well, before we get too detailed, we should get the city and the commission to approve a structure that would allow us then to reach out and have those discussions.
I think it's predicated a bit on what those rates are, those non-resident family rates, season pass rates look like, as sort of a motivation or an incentive. I think the other thing is a big question on equity. What's the equity around the cost to construct when we factor this per capita? Those of us that are city residents are paying on a per capita basis. The cost is such based upon property value, but on a per capita basis, we wanted to offer something a little bit more equitable. We can run the numbers either way; it kind of comes out the same way.
Yeah, the more we talked about it, the more we came up with a per capita. Makes sense. It's not too different than how we fund the airport. So it's a model that exists, and we've done it for a few odds and ends. In any case, what we came up with is for a construction participation, it's the population times $270. So for $270 per person, that's a one-time capital expense. And the municipalities in this area have a lot of bonding capacity. So, the example is the city of Nakusa at a population of 2017, about $680,000.
So what do they get for that, if they decide to do that?
So they get to use the facility at the same rate
As a resident?
As a resident. They're considered a resident.
Okay.
And then there's annual operating costs. We are projecting about $120,000 annual net subsidy. And as an example for Nakusa, at $2.99 per person, that'd be $7,600 a year towards operation. Their facility and facilities like it would have been around $35,000 to $55,000 a year to maintain. $7,000 might seem like a pretty good deal.
So if they sign up, both of these things happen.
Right.
What was the design for this pool?
As far as people,
Maximum capacity?
right around 800, 780 some. And that's a little bit smaller than what was recommended when we did the analysis, but at the same time, we were also cognizant of the cost of the project and scaling it so that we were trying to maintain that $10 million limit on the project. And if we rolled the clock back several years to when we were doing that preliminary design, that's where we would be, but construction costs have gone up since then, so it's $11.5 million project.
It's also a lot more park too than what we.
It is a lot of park.
The pool itself is 10.8, I think.
Right.
Park is.
I apologize, but I have to take my leave.
Thank you, Craig.
See you.
See you later.
You want to vote?
On the fee structure?
The other thing on the list, and we can cover this after you leave, is just who we would invite, and that's just our neighboring municipalities and neighboring towns. It's on the it's on the sheet, but if there's a desire to take some action, I can read those later or just include them in the packet for the general public.
I think we should, entertain a motion. That sounds good to me. You did a lot of work on this.
I'll move to approve the fee structure with the modifications recommended.
Motion made by Craig to accept,
Oh, I'll second.
second by
I wanted
Commissioner
somebody else to.
Okay.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks,
Have
Greg.
a great night.
See ya.
Do we have a quorum yet? Yeah, we do. For the bill.
Thankfully, because we filled some slots, right?
Pardon?
Because we filled a vacancy, yeah, we got
Thanks,
one extra
thanks.
body.
Good five.
So with that, you
Sorry,
can see
Joe.
the list, Ho-Chunk Nation, City of Nakusa, Village of Port Edwards, Village of Buren, Town of Grand Rapids, Town of Port Edwards, Town of Saratoga, Town of Seneca, Town of Siegel.
Yeah.
We've been asked to present to the Ho-Chunk Nation, gosh, I don't remember the date, but it's coming up here this week or next week.
Okay.
Look at my schedule. They're an interesting entity in that they don't have a political boundary like we all have, right? They're non-tribal based, so they've got members, you know, so that would be an interesting one, but nonetheless available.
Right.
One other thing on that design again, so based on 60,000 people, do the engineers have a design capacity based on that, like, population?
Yeah, and,
I mean,
and that's spelled out in that design study report.
Okay.
And they don't spell it out, it's backed out based on surface area of pool for capacity. So, the recommendations that we got from the consultant were this many square feet of water area. And like I said, we're shy of that a bit, but, during that initial design process, we also took a look at, well, we've got 3 bodies of water, the programming, that allows us to program in ways that with 1 or 2 bodies of water you simply can't do. So we feel that, you know, we're gonna provide a lot more service than we maybe would with a 1 or 2 body facility. And that, you know, we're not shutting the pool off to the general public maybe during swim lessons, because we can exclude 1 pool for those uses, the rest of the park can stay open. And so we justified that slightly smaller size. And, you know, and then the other thing, and when we go see it, I think you'll be impressed, just the theming. It really feels neat, you know, when you see the architectural theming and, you know,
Yeah.
the fake rocks that really look like real rocks and
Good.
things like that, so.
Good. Okay, any other discussion? Joel, thanks, all your hard work on that.
Yeah, you bet, and staff that
And
assisted.
the staff, right, exactly. Okay, we move along to the update on the East Riverbank improvements, specifically Mead Rapids View Park.
Want to catch that one, or you want me to work on that one?
I guess we don't really have an engineer's update as to the percent to completion. I think we've asked for that. We've been, with the early onset of weather, they didn't make as much progress, I think, as they were hoping to, right? They've sort of stalled or
Yeah.
postponed until spring.
Probably the biggest component, at least at Mead Riverview, or for that matter, Veterans, is getting the fencing up. We still have temporary
railing,
fencing up,
right.
which has been a little problematic with wind and different things, but it'd be nice to get that in place. Power was restored to the clock bell tower, and half of Veterans Park, again, weather-related, we did get half the sprinkler system reinstalled on the southern half of the park. Northern half is yet to be completed yet.
The railings are still being manufactured, and it's my understanding that the contractor still does intend to do that installation as soon as they are complete, which means sometime yet this winter. That I haven't heard anything to the contrary to that. There's also some of the concrete structural benches, the structural seating. Those, I believe, are gonna be complete this week, and the contractor intends to install those as well. So there should be a little bit more work yet done in this early winter season. And then the completion in the spring, there'll be some landscaping that needs to be done and just some final grading and seating in both parks. We're getting close.
Great.
I'm really
Looks
excited,
good.
about that deck. If you've seen it, it's really pretty. I think once the railings are up, I think that's gonna be a very, very popular place for people to see and check out.
Good.
Yeah, we really even have to tap, knock on wood, contingency, you know, there was a lot of question about the back of the river wall and the quality of that. We tapped some of the
25,000.
25,000 to do some river wall tuck pointing on the backside. There was some question about the quality that until you excavated, you really couldn't see what it was
Yeah,
like.
and we did have a little bit of, we had to tap into contingency, the elevation of that deck. Because of the floodway elevations and the way some of the DNR regulations work, we had to elevate that deck a little bit. And to facilitate that, all of the sidewalk isn't at grade. So you can get on the deck, it's wheelchair accessible, but you can't get on and get off as a flowing, to go across it and off it. The one side, the south side, is gonna have some steps. So if for handicap accessibility, you can get on it, you're gonna come off the same way and go around. There was a little bit of additional cost because of that, and then we also had some lighting, some minor lighting changes in the park to facilitate that through water and light.
Good. Any other questions?
Let's hope for early spring,
Yeah.
for a lot of reasons.
For a lot of reasons.
Yes. Tom, do you have to go? Should we vote on the bills before you have to go, or should we let Matt?
I got time,
Okay. All right. Move on to number 8.
Well- as long as he's not too winded.
I won't be.
We'll have Matt, the update on our storm debris removal.
So I attached the sheet. Basically, as of early last week, we did our last update, so there's an approximate percentage of work completed. And it just identifies the different areas and where we're at in the process as far as completion goes. And this list was actually developed, it's something, a tool that needed to be done for FEMA. They get very, it's a very intensive process that they use to identify damage and to the degree of damage, and so I spent last week 3 days with them, and they were getting down to the point where they were measuring the size of clamps on fence posts, and it's incredibly intensive. So, but we're waiting now for them to send us their report after their information was plugged in, and then we have to review it. And once we review it and sign off on it, then at some point, they'll also send that to our insurance company as well. And so between the two of them, we'll end up with a final dollar amount of what we can expect from.
Yeah, and then behind the scenes, there's a lot of work going on.
Yeah.
The staff is compiling all of the timesheets. Everything has to get coded as to where everybody was, what piece of equipment was being used. I mean, Dawn can attest to the enormous amount of work that is. But that's
Days.
necessary for us to do the submittals.
Yeah.
We have, we're currently working with our rep. We have once a week conference calls to discuss the process, where we're at, what's being sent. It is very time consuming, but at the end of the day, we're looking at $500,000 worth of costs that that we should be able to recoup. And if this were back in 2001, we wouldn't have been able to recoup all this. FEMA's changed their rules. Used to be only overtime and contract work was acceptable. But I think with these events, everywhere, it's the same thing. Everybody drops everything to get things restored, and there's recognition for that. And so, as long as we have our project completed within 6 months, our regular time hours will be reimbursable also. This is really important, because again, we pushed a lot of work off to do this, and to get back on track.
And one thing that isn't mentioned on here, there's a tremendous amount of administration time involved with this as well. And it sounds like some of that will be able to recouped as well.
Right.
I got a question. Okay, on, just for instance, the north ball field fence, this is at Robbie.
Mhm.
A large tree fell on the fence, you ever replace the fence? Has it been replaced?
Yep.
And then the north, the.
100%.
Yeah, I see that. And the north concession stand, I was just wondering on our park, process here, if those are even gonna be needed anymore.
So Kelly, the issue there is that if it's not replaced, it's
It's done, okay,
right, and
okay. Yeah.
our objective was to restore it so that it can be used. Now, some of that facility sometime down the road may become obsolete, and the city may take a different direction there. But for the purpose of these reimbursements,
Okay.
we're restoring everything,
Gotcha.
to pre-storm, except for the trees, obviously, to pre-storm condition.
The other thing in some of these cases too, when we restore them, we do have to make it to comply with current code.
Right.
So there's some minor changes that have to be made so you're complying with current codes.
Okay, thanks. That it? Any questions?
Any questions on where we're at here?
Nope, a lot of work, thanks. Okay. You okay yet?
I'm good.
Okay. Move to number 9, update on the aquatic recreational center.
So again, I think it'd be great if we could schedule a tour sometime soon. If you've driven by, you will see probably one of the finest playgrounds anywhere around. Is all set up. The grades aren't anywhere near done, so if you're looking outside the fence and the thing looks like it's sticking up high, it's because it is. But there's a significant amount of fall protection, pour in place rubberized fall protection that services that facility. The outdoor shelter is structurally up. A lot of that work is still underway. They're going to be there's some masonry work, and they are planning on plasticking that off and heating and doing that work yet this fall. The pump house is complete on the outside for the most part. They're in the process of installing the pumps and the filters, the big filter tanks, the variable frequency drives are all being installed. The heaters, the pool heating boilers are installed. Chemical feed equipment not yet, but that'll be forthcoming. Looking at the pumps downstairs, it's a bit intimidating. There's pumps for filtering, and because of the lazy river in both the top pool and in the regular pool, there's pumps for recirculation as well that aren't just for filtering. The pools themselves, the structures are poured. It's a shotcrete process, so there's a rebar that's placed, and then basically a hose, and they have an outside form, and they spray this material on, and then there's a grout process that needs to take place in all 3 pools, and tile placed on top of that grout to be finished off. The slide tower is done. If you've driven by, there's still a canopy that needs to go on top. As of last week, the plunge slide is complete, and they're just starting assembly of the tube slide. Those things are pretty distinctive, and we tried to select colors that were very tasteful. It alternates between a darker and a lighter, so it's not crazy bold. I think it's very tasteful, the layout there. The theming is complete as far as the rocks and stumps and some of those add-on features. In the lazy river, there's something called an action channel. In the action channel, the water flows a little faster, there's some more spray. There's also a little, a couple waterfalls. There's a little waterfall in the top pool too, on the top lazy river. So those items are complete. Some of the deck has been poured. So there's still a lot of work yet. They're probably 3 weeks behind where they wanted to be before the snow fell. But part of that was because the contractor shut down. We had that cold week, everybody shut down. That following week, it was still a week before deer season, work could have got done, but the supplier shut down. So the bathhouse itself, the walls are up. If you had a set of plans, you could walk through it right now and get a good feeling for what that building's gonna look like as far as how the rooms are gonna function. So that's coming along well. And there's some of the site grading work is complete as well. So it's, I'm concerned about the schedule. I've sat down with the general contractor and we've had some tough conversations because we need to get that thing open on time. They're concerned with it as well. It's a congested site. You can't just throw more people at it. So, I've been asking them to be a bit creative in the spring. Let's try to make sure that everything that can be done early is done. And so that when we're working on deck pours and, final touches, that we're doing that with some time to spare so we can get this thing open on time. So
You know as well as anybody not to accelerate that now in the cold and have something fail later.
correct.
You know that.
Yes, absolutely. Quality trumps everything on this project, and we've got a good contractor, in place that's not going to chance that. This project is quality control, quality assurance is part of the contract, and we've got a significant file of test reports for concrete cylinder test strengths, all of that. So, they have to meet spec, and they are. So, it's coming along nicely. And again, it is really going to be. I'm really excited that for our centennial, we're going to have a facility like this up and running. Really excited about it.
Any consideration given to that being decked out with Christmas lights in the winter with all of the high platforms and stuff?
So,
Oh, no.
Well,
I'm
no,
just kidding.
no, just
Matt's going crazy. No, I think that it's more for the skating area.
the skating area.
Yeah, the trees in the skating area.
The park circle,
Yeah.
the parking circle for the drop-off circle, that's being set up for, so that we can cover it with plastic, block the storm drain there, and flood that for ice skating. And I do anticipate that over time, as the vegetation grows around there, we'll be doing some decorating. I think that's gonna be a really desirable area for the public in the wintertime.
Put a Santa Claus on a sleigh up on top of the chute
Yeah,
there.
there
That's
you
right.
go. Climb off the pool, top of the pool building, right?
Yep.
Yeah, slide down the slide like Bernie.
Right.
Good.
Okay. Thank you, Joel.
You bet.
Any other questions?
We'll just work the schedule. Does Fridays, is there any particular day, part of the day, I know most of you all work, but if you have notice, and tutor is less than an hour, but is there a part of the day we can work on, maybe over the noon hour for folks? If that,
Sure.
weekend, they've been real flexible with us. I've been taking donors through there and they just let us tour on our own actually now without the contractor, so.
It's supposed to be a little warmer toward the end of the week here too, isn't it? Or
End of this week or next week also?
Yeah. Even if we have to coordinate too, I think
Yeah.
it's just, you really need to get in it and see it to really conceptualize it.
It would be great if we could just throw a date out that works for most of us so that we could
fine.
try to throw something. Do you have anything in mind? Next Monday?
Mondays are kind of a bad day for me at work.
Okay.
Thursday or Friday would be good.
Thursday the 19th?
Or
Sure.
even late, is the weather looking nice later this week? Like
Later
Friday or
this week it
something?
is, and I don't know about next week.
Cold this week.
Cold yet this week, I
Yeah.
think.
Tomorrow and Wednesday for sure.
Yeah,
cold.
Tomorrow, Wednesday, then there's a warming
Then-
trend, but
okay.
then snow and rain and freezing stuff like.
35 on Friday though. And
Okay.
Really cool next week.
35 this Friday?
That's what it says, 35 on Friday.
This Friday?
if folks are available.
Friday the
whether-
13th.
Ooh,
Yeah, it is
bad
Friday
luck.
the 13th. We
Okay.
could try
I
to
was
shoot
planning
for
on taking a
something
day of
over-
vacation, but I'd gladly come in and do a
Oh,
tour.
yeah,
if
don't,
that's
no,
allowed.
no,
No, I think if it's gonna be 35, I think it would be,
It's not enjoyable to be out there when it's really cold.
No.
I used
It's
to
all
get on
the
tour
open.
when it was really cold, and that was.
is there a time on Friday that works for everybody?
I can give the tour too, Joe, if you
Okay.
didn't wanna, I'm available after 11 if folks can make something.
Carolyn, that doesn't work for her.
No.
Well, as long as it's earlier, like if you wanted to do it around the noon hour, I can't do it after.
Yeah, but noon hour works if folks wanna shoot
11
for.
work?
11 works? Yeah, if that works
11?
for others, we can say
Are we,
11 on
are
Friday.
we, are we booking it?
Yep,
This
Good,
Friday at
good.
11.
this Friday at 11. We'll put it out to the council too, the members that haven't gotten in there yet. And then meet at the construction trailer on Chestnut. I think I'll go and just do a quick briefing and fill it out, sign in.
We bring our own.
If you have hard hats,
visibility
that's
there.
great. If not, Myron can supply them.
Okay, yeah.
But what you do, if you have, if you happen to have steel toe shoes, great. But wears, you know, it is a construction site, so please wear some boots.
It's wet.
You know, there's snow and it's wet and when you're there, Bob from Myron will be cautioning you, but it is an active construction site and it is snow covered, so you gotta be a little extra careful in some areas when you're walking around. Cause there are some grade changes there and,
I'll bring some ski poles along.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Cross-country ski in and out, yeah?
yeah, just be careful.
I'm guessing I'll have to send some sort of agenda out just as a,
If we're inviting council members, yes, we
And this,
need to,
quorum probably of this group
yep,
too.
just do a notice. I guess all we need to do is. a
Yeah, I
conservation
mean, if you
notice.
wanna bring someone to tour too, you know, we get over 10, it gets pretty tough, but I gave a 30-person touring tour, and that was, we
That was the one-
accommodated it, but that
yeah.
was a lot of people.
Is there information somewhere about how much money has been raised or donated and how much money
Yeah,
this
if you go to
is?
aquatics.wi rapids or
Yeah.
just the homepage, there's a link to the page that should have, you know, fly-through video, so if folks wanna see the
Okay.
YouTube video and all that, that's all on that page.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
actively fundraising certainly for it.
Okay, thanks again. Okay, we move on to bills. Chris, did you take a look at the bills? Could
I
you-
did, Commissioner in Training, I reviewed the bills. Are there any questions on any of them?
Nope,
If
you're the
not-
only one that saw.
Oh, well, you saw the list,
I saw
right?
the
Oh, well, yeah, the amounts. So,
List and amounts. I make a motion that we approve the bills then.
Okay, motion by Chris,
Second.
second by Alderman Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you, Chris, for doing this.
Yep, you bet.
See, Tom?
Yeah.
We wanna go through all this, make a motion to adjourn.
We have
Staff reports, yeah.
Mary included her report, she wasn't able to make it tonight, and I just threw together some of the highlights that's going on right now, didn't get in deep depth, and we talked about most of the stuff, so. Any questions, if you have a chance to read the staff report, if anybody has any questions? Okay.
All right, thanks, man.
motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Chris, second
Second.
by Mary. All in
Second,
favor?
third,
Opposed?
okay, second.
Ayes have it.
Everyone? I think Zach's
You give it
first.
to
Zach got to say.
That's,
Exactly, yes.
get on the board.